And now to the third topic, celestial beings. The sun, the moon, and the stars, sometimes referred to in the biblical text as the host of heaven. And the worship of these celestial objects was commonplace across all of the cultures mentioned thus far, with one exception. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Because first, I want to discuss the cultures that did worship these celestial objects. And we'll start with ancient Egypt, where within the Old Kingdom, star worship was much more pronounced than in later kingdoms. And while Egyptian texts refer to celestial bodies as natural objects, they also assigned divinity to the stars. And certain deities were more related to these celestial bodies than others, such as the sun god Re, as well as the goddesses Nut and Sothis, who were believed to be the starry night sky and the star Sirius. But as one scholar put it would be a mistake to presume that the Egyptian conception of gods was divorced from the stars and other celestial bodies. And Re is not the only Egyptian deity that is identified with the sun. There's other deities that are as well. And there's various traditions as to the sun's journey across the sky, through the underworld every night, and then back in the sky the next morning. One of those traditions is that the sun is reborn from the goddess Nut, while other traditions simply have the sun traveling through the sky in a boat. Similar to Egypt, certain Mesopotamian gods were identified with or as celestial objects. Examples of this are the sun, Shamash, the moon, Nana, and Venus, Inanna or Ishtar. However, most of the Mesopotamian deities are not astral in nature. But it's also important to note that within Mesopotamian culture, the gods and goddesses lived in regions that were either impossible or improper for human beings to inhabit. Therefore, you have certain gods and goddesses associated with the underworld, and because it could be observed that celestial objects moved, it was therefore believed that these objects were living entities or under the power of living entities. And what's incredibly interesting to note is that both the Sumerian and Akkadian words for deity or God are associated with the cuneiform sign for star. And just as within Mesopotamian Egypt, Ugaritic texts contain evidence that deities were associated with the stars. And there is a scholar, though I can't pronounce her first name, but her last name is Korpel, and she has a book titled A Rift in the Clouds, Ugaritic and Hebrew Descriptions of the Divine. And within this book, she produces several astral descriptions of the gods. And these include heavenly ones, star gods, the race of heaven, and lords of the stars. And the god El is also mentioned in texts with other gods that have well-known associations with celestial objects, such as Shahar and Shalim, that is, dawn and dusk, as well as the sun and the moon. Now, what's evident across all these cultures is the fact that these objects moved or appeared to move across the night sky, and they moved in patterns that governed the night, the day, the times, and the seasons. And therefore, they needed an explanation as to why this was the case. And the explanation that was provided was that these were living or divine beings, or under the power of a divine being or entity. We can even see evidence of this within the Greco-Roman culture, where the sun, moon, and stars were considered eternal, while gods such as Zeus, Hera, and Poseidon were considered immortals. So even in the Greco-Roman culture, a distinction existed between these celestial objects and the main deities of their pantheon. Now, it is true that within the biblical text, in some instances, these celestial objects are referred to as the host of heaven. And there is even correlation between the angels and the stars. We even see evidence of this thought in Paul's letter to Rome in Romans 4:18. But the reason for this is that the ancient Israelites were part of the ancient Near Eastern culture. And just like the other cultures, they could see these celestial bodies moving across the night sky. However, a major point of difference within the Israelite culture and the biblical text compared to all of these other cultures and religions is that within the biblical text, the celestial bodies were created by Yahweh. We see this in Genesis 1:14, where the text states, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from night, and let them be for signs and for appointed times." That word season means appointed times or appointed festivals. "And for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And so what we see is that these celestial bodies were not deities. They were simply celestial bodies that were created for a specific purpose. In fact, the Dictionary of Deities and Demons summarizes this well. It states this: a third group of deities consists of gods mentioned in the Bible, but not in their capacity as gods. They are the so-called de-mythologized deities. Examples abound. One of the Hebrew words for moon used in the Bible is Yereah. This is the etymological equivalent of Yarik, the moon god known from Ugaritic texts. Although the moon may have retained faint traces of divinity in the Bible, it has basically been divested of its divine status. The same holds true for the sun. The Hebrew word corresponds with the god Shamash in Akkadian and the goddess Shapshu. Now, this is not to deny that within ancient Israel there was worship of the sun, moon, and stars. There clearly was, based on the data within the biblical text. However, regarding Orthodox Israelite religion, any worship outside of Yahweh alone was strictly forbidden within the biblical text. There are numerous examples, but perhaps the best is in Deuteronomy 4:19, where it describes the sun, the moon, and the stars as the host of heaven, but speaks of how these were allotted to all of the nations under heaven. And this is a direct correlation to both Deuteronomy 32 as well as the Tower of Babel, when humanity, according to the biblical text, rebelled against God. And therefore, God allotted the nations away. Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, be sure to check out the full-length video by clicking the link right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on biblical mythology. And I will see you on the next video. Thank you so much for the support.